So Ron, out of all the products you sold throughout the years at PSC, is there anyone that stands out the most that you enjoyed selling the most?
Yeah, probably Tectal, probably the undercoating business.
I know. When did we start selling that or jumping into that
Probably
industry?
around 1967. I was in my office about 6:30 one night with the Valvoline rep, and I got a call from a competitor, and he said, I have a Valvoline rep in my office, and we sell this rust preventive, and he wants us to have a bigger inventory, and I just don't want to spend the money on bigger inventory. If you would buy out my inventory, I'd give you the customers I have.
Oh, wow.
And I said, I put my hand over the phone, and I said to the Valvoline guy, this guy tells me he's got the Valvoline rep in his office. And the guy said, hey, let's get him down there. I'd like to meet the guy, okay? So the guy came down, and he turned out he was with Valvoline, but he was in the industrial division that sold Tectal. And I ended up buying out the company's inventory, and that's how we took on the Tectal distributorship,
Wow.
which was exciting. Up until that point, most of our business was in the service stations, and back in those days, the oil companies were making all the money they could on product because there was shortages. So they started really emphasizing tires, batteries, spark plugs, and that kind of thing. So this took us in a different direction. Took me down to the docks in New York and Port Elizabeth and selling coatings to the container ship people.
And that was still fairly new industry at that time?
Yeah, it was. As a matter of fact, I remember the salesman telling me someday we'll be able to pigment these products, and because all they had was
Colors.
an amber-colored petroleum product or black because they would put carbon black in it.
Oh, so like after you got the accounts, were you back hitting the streets? Like I know you mentioned you went to New York, and was that a lot of what it was, or?
Yeah, towns like York, Pennsylvania had Caterpillar Tractor, and there were some Borg Warner. There's some great accounts down in Pennsylvania itself. But the expansion, the big expansion, was in the shipping industry.
Okay.
And then Bud Corporation had a big plant on a Route 100 near Philadelphia. There were a lot of big plants around here that used rust preventive at the time, making trailers and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, going through and seeing everything that you've collected in the garage, I mean, it's just incredible, from the the small collectible toys to these giant signs
Right.
from years past. Was there anything in particular that you've always been seeking, looking for? Is there any collectible as the one that got away?
Yeah, not something I was looking for, something we had. We had about 40 or 50 old gasoline pumps that we had stored in the basement of this building. And we needed room. So we brought in containers, and we threw them all in containers and scrapped them. And about 2 months later, this was back in 1990, Mountain Productions was doing the Grand Prix race, the Formula One race in Phoenix.
All right.
And I was out there, and my wife came back from a shopping center and said, I got to take you to this store. You ought to see what they do with all gasoline pumps. So I went there, and I looked at a pump like we had thrown away. They were getting $6,000 for it. It was, and in that market, I don't know if it's still as hot, but yeah, we threw a lot of things away that we would have saved. When we remodeled the building at the warehouse across the street, we had Flying A porcelain signs, about 10, 12 inches, I don't know what they were, that we used to screw on the front of the pumps in wooden boxes. They were beautiful. And we threw them away because we didn't see any value in them at the time. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that people threw away in the oil industry that they wish they had kept.
A lot of the collectibles we saw, were a lot of those acquired through the business, or was there any type of collecting that you were really into early on that you started getting from outside of the business, if you will?
Yeah, a lot of times we had turnover in gas stations, and people would leave things there. A lot of the things were just left there because they were garbage. Nobody. There was down in with my trains, there was a Pullman, an aluminum Pullman set of step that they used to get on and off the train. Somebody left it in the gas station, and it's painted yellow. It's a collector's item now.
Right.
It was a piece of junk years ago.
Did you want to touch at all about the, like when you got going at Petroleum Service Company, what you kind of were doing in the early days, or anything along those lines?
The company was started by a fellow by the name of William O. Sword, and a guy by the name of Will Evans. And they hired my dad to work in the gas station. There used to be a little gas station next door, and that's how he got started in the company. But back in those days, they had one truck, and if they were hauling case goods, they would put them on the back of the flatbed. And if somebody ordered gasoline, the tank would hold 550 gallons. They kept it in the garage with a winch, and they would drop it down in the flatbed and secure it, and then they would go out and load the gas and deliver it.
So
And,
that truck was universal, it could haul fuel
It
or,
was one truck they used for everything.
wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Never knew
One
that.
day, somebody was going across the railroad tracks down in Linwood, and he didn't have the tank secured, and it came off the truck.
I bet the Department of Transportation was all over that.
Back in those days, I don't think they
No,
were
yeah, I
around.
don't think
so
they
they
were
just
in
kept
too
on-
much.
There was no oil
I think they
drive,
kept
it'll
going.
It was
evaporate.
empty anyway. If it was full, it probably would have stayed on the truck. The company was started in 1924. It was incorporated in 1930, and it really supplied service stations. In those days, a service station actually provided service. They had bays, they washed cars, they fixed cars, they lubricated cars. But then, as the industry changed, first of all, the cars became more sophisticated, and you couldn't do your own work. And now we see it's basically the convenience stores that are dominating the industry. My introduction to the oil business was working in my uncle's gas station. So my main responsibility was washing cars at the time and pumping gas, because back in those days, when you walked out to the island, you always had to ask if you could fill it up, and you had a bow tie. I don't even
Look at that.
I don't wear a tie to work today, but in those days I wore a bow tie and the uniform, and I did that until I was old enough to drive, and then when I was 16, I could drive a pickup truck and deliver oil, and I did that. And while I was in college, I worked at Petroleum Service Company. And then when I got out of college, I did a couple things. First of all, before I got out, I joined the Army as an enlisted man. I enlisted, went to Fort Knox, Kentucky for my basic training, Fort Sill, Oklahoma for my artillery training. Came back here and joined Petroleum Service Company in 1960 on the road, selling anything that we could sell to the service stations, and did that for quite a while. But then, I did everything from drive the tankers. I drove tankers. In those days, I don't think there were any regulations there were no CDLs.
No.
I was driving a tanker when I was 17, 18 years old. So.
And at that time, were there more than one? Was there more than one delivering trucks? Or,
Yeah.
more than one
At that
delivery
point,
truck?
fuel oil had become the way to heat natural gas. They were just laying the pipelines for natural gas.
Nowadays in northeastern Pennsylvania, natural gas is a big thing. There's a big natural gas boom going on in the area.
Right.
Did you ever think, being from back in the coal mining days to now, like you'd see something like that? Because I know they've known it existed a while, but, to see that transition take place where, we now support that industry.
Well, yeah, I saw it. I tell you, years ago, the oil companies got together and they had a fund, and they would put money in, like maybe 2-3 cents a gallon, and they would use it to advertise against natural gas. And I went to one of the meetings, and I came back and I said to my dad, I think this is pretty silly, fighting the natural gas companies because they've got a good product. I think we should take that money and buy stock in the gas company. Well, as we sit here today, Rick Rose is on the board of a gas company. I was on the board of a gas company. I think I was the first chairman of an oil company board to be chairman of the New York Stock Exchange natural gas company, Pennsylvania Enterprises.
Oh, geez.
So, we saw natural gas coming, and it's still got a great future. With the rules against pollution with coal, the most sensible thing to do is change these the generation plants to natural gas, and that's what's happening throughout the country. So
And you had that-
pipelines and natural gas go together. It's a big industry.
Well, another thing with the pipelines I have to ask, because I know it's one of your babies that you kind of nurtured here, was the Clemco business
Yeah.
and the sandblasting, and how much even something like that ties back to everything that PSC does as far as lubricants and supporting these industries. It's not just fuel and lubricants, but
Well, it's interesting that I know you're selling a lot of sandblast machines to the oil industry and the pipeline industry, but when I first took on that franchise back in 1967, I think it was, I did it because the guys who were buying the Techtel Daguan containers were also sandblasting those units. And I thought it was a natural for us to start selling sandblast equipment.
Yeah.
So we've done that for a long time. And now, as Northeast Pennsylvania is a big part of the shale natural gas business, we see a lot of action, not only in the pipelines, but in the drilling industry.
Oh yeah, and I mean, for you to have the insight to get that transition going at a time when it was still natural gas wasn't where it is today, especially in an industry and surrounded by where we are in this area, to have that type of insight, I mean, that just shows you about the constant evolving that needs to be done in any type of industry, kind of like how today we can reach out to people that are down in the South, that are in the Midwest. These, where we used to be more localized, now we can reach them with a national reach with the way that e-commerce is going and things along those lines. So I think that, just, that incredible natural progression to kind of stay ahead,
Right.
and keep an eye on what the next thing is going to be is what has made the company so successful all these years.
Well, I think you've already hit on what the next thing is going to be for Petroleum Service Company. As I look at what we're doing with our own filmmaking operation, the way we ship with our e-commerce, you got to put natural gas through a pipeline, but you can ship drums and cases every day out of here by FedEx and UPS and all the other carriers that come in and out of Petroleum Service Company. So there's a huge future there, and yeah, we've jumped on that. And energy is energy, whether it's natural gas going through a pipe, whether it's electricity that's made by natural gas or coal or nuclear. Energy is energy, and we keep consuming more of it all the time. And the computers themselves have led to a big jump in that. Look at our electric bills here with all the computers.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
And I mean, interestingly enough, some of the petroleum that comes out of the ground helps to produce those computers themselves. So just tying back how they're all kind of, the industries have all merged together there at this point. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's a changing industry. We gotta stay with it. If your business doesn't change, you go out of business. So you just gotta keep current.
Absolutely.